Hello everyone, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that you've had a very relaxing Friday night and Saturday, and I hope that you guys are safe, that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's a ton of stuff happening throughout the world, as I'm sure you can tell. There is a lot of stuff happening inside of Ukraine. There's stuff happening all over the globe, in Iran, of course. And so a lot of these situations, though, just in general are not very good. They're kind of a downer. These are kind of a lot of crises ongoing throughout the world. A lot of people are suffering. 345 million people actually are food insecure. Or in the words of the director of the World Food Program, marching towards starvation. Many of those are in areas that we cover every single day here on the news. And so the whole point of this is, when it comes to these crises, we can't, here at the new news, we can't say anything worse than, one, perpetuating these crises, but also making money off of them, profiteering off of this, which is why here we are never, and I do mean never, actually going to be going through and making any money off of these. 100% of everything that we do is charity driven. So if you go and you check out the video description below, please do so, and check out all the different organizations. There was a ton that got suggested today. Hopefully we'll see even more. But it's to help us raise money to help people throughout the world, to be the news that gives back. And 80% or more of all the donations those organizations receive actually go to their programs, meaning they actually go to helping people, and they're not just, you're not just taking that money and giving a little bit for some PR and what have you. So with that, please go and check out the video description. They cover a wide variety, and if you have more, please go and send them to us, jump on our Discord. Let us know if you have more organizations. We would love to continue adding. We just got a bunch in today, and we hope to get even more in here into the future, so we can go through and get those vetting processes started. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, that's okay. Give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us grow this project. The more people that come here and watch this and chip in, the more of an impact that we have as a community. And so we want to be able to have as big of an impact as possible, do as much good throughout the world as possible, and we can only do that with your guys' support. So thank you for the support thus far, and hopefully that will continue long and far into the future. And with that, before we jump into the news, I am watching the live chat, so that way you guys can watch and see kind of what's happening, so that way I can answer your questions. So feel free, please ask questions throughout the duration of the entire stream regarding the subjects we're talking about, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Give you a little bit of a backgrounder on myself. I served as a corporal in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I did 2 tours to the Middle East. My first tour, I did, of course, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, where I went between October of 2017 and March of 2018. I spent 4.5 months in Syria and a month and a half in Kuwait. My second tour, I went back to Kuwait with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. I was in charge of the anti-armor team attached to the Crisis Response Company, and I then went to the Baghdad Embassy compound on New Year's of 2020, where I oversaw anti-armor operations for the entire Baghdad Embassy complex. And then I also went to Saudi Arabia and down into the Red Sea to train Saudi Arabian Marines headed into Yemen to fight the Houthi rebels. I'm a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, and I'm also a fully cross-trained rifleman, a combat lifesaver Marine, and also I am a partially cross-trained radio operator. So I can answer a lot of questions, especially at the tactical level. I will try to piece together some stuff at the strategic level as well, and kind of give my input on other situations, kind of military side of things and conflict side of things. I try to stay very well rounded, so I try to, I'm very interested in history and geopolitics and stuff, so I try to stay well rounded outside of that. But I can't guarantee anything. So if I don't know something, I will just say I don't. But regardless of your question, I will try to answer it to the best of my ability. And hopefully I'll be able to go through that. But I always implore you as a viewer to do your own research and to look into this stuff if it interests you yourself. Because at the end of the day, don't listen to some guy on the internet. Do your own research. It's always valuable. And I'm just here to bring awareness. And with that, we jump down here and we get right into the news, of course, with a special report happening out of Ukraine. And so we actually start off here up in Kyiv, where important energy infrastructure was hit in Kyiv. Russian missile strikes on the outskirts of Kyiv severely damaged key energy infrastructure, this has been reported by the state-owned grid operator Ukrenegro on today. Kiev Oblast Governor Alexei Kuleba said that the strike hit one of the communities in the region at around 7 a.m. No casualties have been reported thus far. The deputy head of Ukraine's presidential administration, Krylo Tomashenko, advised that the populations of Zhytomyr, Cherkasy, and Chernihiv are also save electricity. We do know, and that is being reported by both the Kyiv Independent and the BBC. We see a lot of stuff happening here in these areas, and it's just a lot of we're seeing just a ton of stuff happening when it comes to the targeting of infrastructure, as well as just the general harassment of civilians using large-scale missile strikes, and also attacks by other things such as these kamikaze drones, the Shahed 131s and 136 drones that were provided by Iran. So we're seeing quite an uptick in these types of attacks, and that's kind of the theme of the day. Is a lot of attacks happened over the last 24 hours, and very heavy shelling in places throughout Ukraine, and places like Bakhmut, Nikopol, obviously Kyiv was hit as well as other locations too. And we're seeing the Ukrainian Air Force fighting in a lot of different areas, and what we're seeing as a lot of these Ukrainian Air Force at this point, their combat air patrols are mostly trying to shoot down a lot of these ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and kamikaze drones. And to actually combat these Shahed drones, Ukraine spent 150 million of their currency, about $4 million US today, in less than 48 hours to buy 3 catchers for Shahed drones. The systems will force Iranian-made drones to raise to a higher altitude, where they'll be easily shot down by Ukrainian air defense. So if you can't directly hit them, then you can afford. It's trying to bottleneck aircraft essentially. So either they get caught with these systems at a low altitude, or they fly at a high altitude where they're easily shot down by anti-air defense systems. It's a defense in depth is kind of the mentality here, and that's really what we're seeing from the Ukrainians. They're trying to force the hand of. They're trying to force these into being no longer a viable military option, which is very, very good to see. This is kind of what you're always going to be seeing on a battlefield. Is you're going to see people countering to each other, just like you have offensives, military technology also. So as what evolves, what the enemy uses, the tactics and equipment that they use evolves on the battlefield. The opponent, the other side, is going to constantly try to counteract that. What we see, though, is a lack of Russia really trying to do this. Really, the biggest change they've made is the Shahed drones throughout the duration of the war. Most of their tactics, their equipment, nothing else has really changed. They're even to the structural side of things, they haven't really changed a whole lot. It's the same tactics, the same everything that they've used the entirety of the war, and it really plays to their detriment, where we're seeing them fail in a lot of combat operations throughout the entirety of the conflict, and we're seeing the defensive lines really break down. They are trying to improve those defensive lines and really shift kind of into a much more static, hardened defensive tactic, with a defense in depth as well there, which is a change for them as opposed to what they have been doing. But we also see the Shahed drones, which is the biggest problem, I think, for Ukraine drone-wise. That's definitely their biggest gripe at this point. And this is coming out of Shevchenko Park. For those that may remember, Shevchenko Park was hit during that initial onslaught on Monday. So when those missiles initially hit, one of them landed directly into a playground here at Shevchenko Park, which is in downtown Kyiv, and I mean right downtown Kyiv. This is Taras Shevchenko Park here. No playground, no problem. So it's kind of eerie, but it's kind of a happy scene. It's life coming back to this playground just destroyed by Russian missiles earlier this week.
Хотіли налякати, зробили ще одну атракцію для дітей. Ось так. Українці просто фантастичні. Хотіли...
So it's just a bunch of kids there that decided to go back to the park and play in the giant bomb crater. It's kind of eerie, but it's kind of cool to see that life does still go on. The resiliency of the Ukrainians is really something that it's hard to fathom how one makes it through something like this, but they do. Move on here and into starting getting into the combat areas here in Ukraine, and we actually start rolling in here at the Kharkiv Oblast. This is here in Kozatcha Lupan, which was liberated about a month ago. This is one of the areas. There was a pocket of Russian resistance in this area. This is up by the border. The National Police of Ukraine, or the NPU, have discovered more graves in Kozatcha Lupan here in the Kharkiv Oblast. They stated the bodies show signs of violent deaths. Usually that indicates to torture and execution of those individuals. So they did release a couple of photos, nothing graphic, but they did release photos of them there and conducting an investigation, exhumation process, or exhuming these bodies found here in Kozatcha Lupan. Move down here and into the south side of, or kind of on the southeastern portion of the Kharkiv Oblast, where children running a mock checkpoint here. We've actually seen these kids before on this channel. It's kind of cool. But they have set up their own little checkpoint, and they like to stop Ukrainian soldiers. It's kind of funny. But these children are running a fake checkpoint in the Donetsk Oblast, and they raised money locally for Ukrainian troops and presented it to them during one of their traffic stops. Take a look.
Не стреляй, не стреляй! Молодец, мама. Давай. Що там в тебе? Ні, друже. Давай зробимо так. Давай зробимо так. Ми зробимо тобі подарунок, а ти будеш далі стояти і держати блокпост, так? Давай 5. Давай 5. Ні, гроші не треба. Давай ми зробимо це. Ми зробимо тобі внесок в фонд.
So it's pretty cool. I mean, kids are always going to be kids. I knew I used to do this stuff when I was a kid. And so it's kind of cool, though. Now, considering it is kind of still an active area, this area seems to be relatively behind the lines at this point and relatively safe. But this kid is, he set up his own little military checkpoint. And Ukrainian soldiers stop for it. They actually stop, which is cool. I'm sure that every time they come through, I'm sure it makes that kid's day. Down here in Le Mans, which was recently liberated not too long ago, the International Committee of the Red Cross delivered over 20 tons of humanitarian aid to the area, where roughly about 7,000 civilians still reside.
Normally, it's way.
When I say liberated, who am I referring to? That's coming from Super Seamster's Sewing Show. That's a tongue twister if you say it too fast. And I'm not very good at pronunciation. I'm saying liberated, meaning that Ukrainian forces went to a location and retook the town. That is liberating. The Russians use the term liberation as well on their side of things. Now, on this channel, we have a very clear bias. That is that we are Ukrainian, but we are pro-Ukrainian. And that's not a bias based off of like Western, you know. You have to keep in mind, as a viewer, you're seeing roughly 10 to 25% of what's out there. We have sources in all different locations, both Russian and Ukrainian, when it comes to this war. And a lot of the stuff that we aren't showing is extremely graphic. It's very difficult to look at, let alone it's very it's hard to look at, let alone hard to report on. And it can get pretty bad to look to see. And there comes a point in which you've just seen so much of it that you can't. When you see how bad it really is, I cannot in any moral way support the Russians in this endeavor. Now, I do have a little bit of a background on this. When I was in Syria, I treated a lot of casualties that were created by either pro-Assad regime forces, which are backed by the Russians, and or the Russian forces directly. A lot of civilian casualties, especially amongst internally displaced people and refugees from the local areas that I was at. So I tried to put that aside during this war, but I've seen way too much going through and researching for this, and and the rest of the team can attest to that too, is there's just too much indiscriminate bloodshed. This goes so far beyond just a military operation that you get collateral damage. The Geneva Convention even understands that collateral damage is a fact of war. It will happen. Innocent people do lose their lives, but there comes a point in which case that's no longer the case. And this is really what we're seeing here. And so, yes, the Russians are not liberating anybody of anything but their lives, is what they are doing. They're killing an immense amount of people indiscriminately. They're doing it in some very horrific fashions. We can't support it. So we have a very clear bias. We try to remain unbiased in a lot of ways and apolitical. We try to. But this is one that you cannot be. I do not believe you can be unbiased on this news. You cannot. You cannot watch this happen and see what is happening with any clear conscience and not have a bias for Ukraine defending itself. Because after everything I've seen and all the definitions, it's just horrendous. I mean, it's a genocide done poorly against the Ukrainian people. It really is. Super Seamster Sewing Show says, so what about the Russian bloodshed since 2014 with the overthrowing of the elected government and putting in the Nazi regime? Okay, so I'm going to guess and say that you are pro-Russian. So that's a very pro-Russian rhetoric. And to address that, so here's the issue. If you look in 2014, you look at the Maidan Revolution. The Maidan Revolution occurred because of a ton of collaboration under a pro-Russian government that was basically they were using political monetary funds to build projects that. This is pretty much how it started. They were building projects that were not approved, and they basically were doing them anyway, and they were embezzling an immense amount of funds. There's an immense amount of corruption within the country of Ukraine. That's something Ukraine has dealt with since 1991, when it became an independent nation and was accepted into the United Nations. The people, after all of this time, and also after a rather horrendous crackdown, in which case the pro-government, or the government of Ukraine in 2014, pro-Russian government, began to open fire with live ammunition on the protesters, mostly university students. And what ended up happening is it turned into a revolution. There's a small section of individuals within the Donbass, specifically the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts, which are primarily Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine. And a very small group of them did become separatists. They began fighting the Ukrainian army once the government was overthrown, the pro-Russian government was overthrown, and a new government was installed. What ended up happening is the government ends up fighting the separatists, and they begin to lose extremely badly. They get pushed back pretty bad, or they get pushed back pretty much to the point that they're losing most of their holdings, and that's when the Russians actually come in. They come in with no uniform. They come in with no insignias on their uniform, which is against the Geneva Convention for an International Armed Conflict. And they begin supplying weapons and actually putting in troops into the Donbass, and specifically, most notably, into Crimea, where they end up taking that over, and then a referendum with like a 90% or whatever. It's like a 90% for joining the Russian Federation. Once again, one of those annexations, which is not actually considered recognized by the international community. Or by the United Nations, because under the United Nations, the territorial integrity of Ukraine is based off of when they were accepted into the United Nations in 1991, and the referendum happened during a military occupation, which is the use of force to change the international boundary. So they're not actually considered. Crimea is not considered part of the Russian Federation to anyone but the Russians and whoever they have an alliance with. So that is the whole thing. Now, the shelling really stalled, and there really wasn't any fighting. And when it comes to the shelling of the Donetsk region, and indiscriminate shelling is how a lot of Russian sources will put it. They're massacring so many people. Once again, there's a war going on here, and it's supplied mostly by the Russians, because the separatists would have absolutely been demolished probably no later than 2016 with small pockets of resistance if it hadn't been for the fact that the Russians were supplying them pretty heavily and pretty openly about it too. Now, to destroy that rhetoric of, they're being indiscriminate and they're massacring people. This is the city of Donetsk. Donetsk is one of the largest cities. It's also where two of the front lines are the closest. I'm getting ready to tell you about that sewing show. So this is the Donetsk International Airport. This is considered a valid military target under the laws of war and about every convention you can possibly think of. This is a valid military target. And if you look here, you can even see where anti-aircraft emplacements have been staged around the city, and there's around the airport and or for its defenses. And you can see earthworks popping up all around this location. And you can see the immense amount of destruction. Keep in mind, this is off of Google My Maps, which is all of this satellite footage is from 2000 or prior to the invasion. So all of this destruction would have happened in the last 8 years of conflict that happened here. And what you see is you do see immense amount of destructions, entire hangar bays and everything completely destroyed around the international airport. And then as you get outside the airport, you see there's a small neighborhood here which has been pretty messed up. It's been pretty destroyed. That is directly adjacent to the military target. So we can chalk this one up into collateral damage. Likewise, you can see as the destruction moves into these areas. However, we move over into here, where you can see that very openly, this area has not been destroyed or has received minimal amounts of destruction. Are there houses still being hit? Yes, you can see where they are. You can see the outlines of their foundations where the roofs have collapsed in. They are vacant and they have been hit by shelling. Once again, you're not very far from this warehouse. But as you move deeper and deeper, you're not really seeing that whatsoever. You get about a block away. You're not seeing indiscriminate shelling. You have to keep in mind that post-invasion, you're talking about heavy grad systems, which are BM-21 grad systems. They fire 40 round salvos of 122 millimeter Katyusha dumbfire rockets. And so so as you can see with, say, the Battle of Mariupol, where you can see it does not take It does not take a lot to flatten entire neighborhoods. And if there was that level of shelling, as has been described by the Russians and by the separatists and pro-Russians inside of these areas, collaborators, as I prefer to call them, then you would see an immense amount more of destruction, especially with such a large population center that is so densely concentrated. And you do not have those images. You see it mostly, you see collateral damage in and around a valid military target, but once you get about a block and a half away, everything is okay. And you see that for the duration of what's happened throughout the war. Whenever there's a strike in downtown Donetsk, it's usually immediately afterwards we get video footage of Russian military vehicles leaving that site because it was being used as a logistical hub or a headquarters by Russian forces. And sure, are there a couple of civilians that probably were killed in the process? Yes, but once again, that is considered collateral damage, and you're limiting the strikes. They're using Excalibur rounds and HIMARS, things that have accuracy within 10 meters of their intended target, whereas Russian military weapon systems of precision, such as the Caliber cruise missile, is accurate within hundreds of meters. That is not precision. Now, to answer your second question, is, you have a couple of them, but they all roll together. What about the Biden spending billions to Ukraine while people here in the U.S. are having problems? What about all the weapons the U.S. is supplying, $50+ billion? So, the United States Department of Defense has a budget of $778 billion per year, and the United States has an economy the size of, I believe, about $4 trillion annually. There's also, of course, plenty of other funds that are set aside just for these instances, and including those for the U.S. aid. So where are most of the weapons coming from? Well, weapon stockpiles are built up over decades of time, and we're sending some of our oldest munitions to those places. In fact, the HARMS missiles that everyone likes to talk about are not actually the newest types of HARM missiles. We have much better HARM missiles that we use in the U.S. military. And so we end up being sent over here. And then the older stockpiles get sent over here, get used by Ukraine, and they end up being effective because you don't have to have the best stuff. You just have to get the better stuff than the Russians. And the stockpiles of weaponry and everything the United States maintains is well over the normal overage you're going to see for most countries. In fact, whenever you're talking about military overage and stockpile quantity, it's about a 10% overage. The United States maintains well above that, specifically for the purpose of having to assist other countries with outfitting forces such as Ukraine. And there's contingencies and reasons behind this, and there's billions of dollars. The $18 billion that has been provided, I think it's 18.3 billion, that has been provided to Ukraine since the beginning of this war, which is since the 24th of February, and the 20.6 billion that's been provided since 2014 is a drop in the hat military-wise. It's a drop in the hat when it comes to military spending. That for the United States defense budget, that spending, $17 billion, is pissing in the wind for the U.S. budget when it comes to defense. Okay? So it's not like you're spending just an immense amount of money on this. That's not true. It's an immense amount of money to you. It's not an immense amount of money in the big scheme of things. If Ukraine wanted to have a war, they need to pay for themselves. I don't think they wanted to have a war. They got invaded, which we talked about, which was pretty well stated before the beginning of the war, that they were going to be invaded, and no one listened to them. And when it comes, by the way, for those that don't know how U.S. politics work, the president does not set the budget. For those that don't know, the president doesn't set the budget. The president is legally obligated by law to spend the budget set by Congress, which also Congress sets the debt ceiling. So it's basically Congress gets to determine what's happening in the United States, and then the president gets the blame on it. For those that don't know, it's actually Congress that sets those things, not the president. The president gets the opportunity to present their option, which immediately gets completely destroyed by both sides. And so that's how setting the U.S. budget actually works. For those that don't know, so the president really doesn't have nearly as much influence as you think he does in how politics work in the United States. So, but anyway, moving on to issues that actually matter. When you jump down here and into the Donetsk region, where we see the daily Donetsk update. And this comes from Pavel Krylenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, and he says, quote, on October 14th, the number of victims of the Russian army in the Donetsk Oblast increased by 8 killed and 6 injured. We actually get this from his official Twitter. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, 1,002 civilians in the Donetsk Oblast have been killed since the 24th of February, and 2,402 have been injured. Those numbers do not include those killed and wounded in places such as Mariupol or Volnovakha. Down here in Koshcheniivka was shelled rather heavily. Quote, Russian forces shelled the Ukrainian city of Koshcheniivka, located in the Donetsk Oblast. There are no updates regarding casualties at this point, but it does appear that it struck mostly civilian infrastructure. Once again, coming from Pavel Krylenko, we can see these impacts. I mean, look at a giant crater right next to an apartment complex. And this is all happening as very heavy fighting is reportedly taking place in and around the area of Bakhmut. Bakhmut lies right here. Right here along this kind of axis of advance for the Russians. The axis of advance goes from the north up here by Soledar, where last we heard they were on the outskirts, when that was over a month ago, all the way down here to about Toretsk, with a supporting effort up here in the north by Siversk. Which was by Siversk until they got pushed back. At this point, we do not know the exact situation. Our understanding is that and what we're seeing is that the most of the combatants on the Russian side going into this area are from the Wagner Group. For those that don't know, the Wagner Group is a private military corporation created by the Russians in 2014 in response to everything happening in this. And so what we're seeing is that the Wagner Group is really trying to go for a win here, just to boost morale, to boost recruitment in this area. And at this point, we're seeing that this is a video of a Ukrainian resident here in Bakhmut, showing what's left as residents are kind of coming out of their bomb shelters today and looking at the destruction of their homes, which is, there's literally no building in Bakhmut which has not been at least damaged by Russian shelling at this point. Take a look.
Это результаты вчерашнего обстрела. Куда-то рельсы с бетоном делись в выгребной яме. Корыто в решето. Забора нету. Гаражик весь посеченный. Крыша побита. Непонятно где что. Сарай. Дребезги. Ну что ж, будем восстанавливать. Оборвало всю утеплитель. Туалет, душ. Все разлетелось.
What is happening in my live chat? Ukraine wins. Ukraine wins. Evil will become normalized. So before I kick you out of my live stream here, Super, I would like to respond to that and many other things that I'm not going to repeat on a live stream. He said, Ukraine wins, evil will become normalized. I don't know if you were here when I gave my intro there, sewing show, but I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. My first tour in Syria, where I spent 4.5 months, was in 2017, October of 2017 to March of 2018. And in 4.5 months in Syria, I saw well over 400 casualties, mostly civilians and internally displaced people that were bombed and wounded by the Russians and the Russian-supported Assad regime. I watched as they bombed entire villages to the ground along the Middle Euphrates River Valley, leaving nothing standing but the mosque. Bodies burnt to the crisp inside of cars, unrecognizable to determine even the gender, let alone the age or the identity. The innumerable amount of suffering, the unquantifiable amount of suffering that I witnessed firsthand haunts me to this very day. I do not sleep well ever because of what I saw. I do not sleep well. I have constant night terrors. The terror and destruction and death that was caused by the Russians and the Assad regime is indescribable, and I wish it never happened. But then I saw something else, and I witnessed him was part of something else. On February the 6th, 2018, the Wagner Group, the ones perpetrating quite a few of these things, attacked the United States forces, specifically my sister platoon, Cat 2 Red Section, located in the Conoco gas plants near Kasham, which is down in Deir ez-Zor province. 300 of them attacked that location, along with several hundred pro-Assad regime fighters. I was part of the QRF force that responded out of Ashdodi, Syria, Firebase Ashdodi, and I went south to support that endeavor. We called the Russian government and asked, are there any forces in the area? They said no, and we bombed them. And we killed and wounded over 300 of them. It was one of the greatest fireworks displays I've ever seen in my life. The immense amount of that is an attack on U.S. forces by the Russian Federation, by the use of a private military corporation to say it was plausible deniability. I do not hold Russians in high regard for anything. I watched as they massacred people in Syria, and I got to deal with their casualties. Because as a CLS Marine, you assist in treating casualties. You help the corpsmen. And then I see this every single day. A lot of people being killed and injured and wounded and maimed horrifically. So yeah, if you don't like what we're doing here in the United States, and you're not super interested, and you think that the Russians are having a genocide committed against them, which is false, and I can prove it. I have proved it every single day of this channel. Then I advise you to go to Russia, go get your recruitment orders. As we know for a fact, you don't have to be a Russian citizen to get your orders. I'll contact the Russian embassy in the United States to get you your orders if you would like. I can do that. And you can go and you can fight for the cause that you believe in. If that is your choice. And so with that, I'm going to return to the news. And yeah. Have fun fighting for the Russians in Ukraine, bud. And with that, go back to what is happening there in Ukraine, which is where we see quite a lot of heavy fighting there in the area of Bakhmut. Ukrainian and Russian forces have been heavily fighting in the area, which is a renewed offensive regarding the Wagner group, which I was just talking about. They seem to be the main ones perpetrating the fighting within this area. But this is the situation from the positions of Ukrainian troops within the area. Now, it does have some copyright music, so I can't show it, so I can't play the audio to this, but this is coming from a Ukrainian soldier there in the defensive positions in and around the area. You can see the immense level of destruction. I mean, the entire landscape is just horrendously scarred by what has happened in this area. So we do know it's pretty significant and heavy fighting in that. However, the information is very limited. Move over here. This is in the video of Pokrovsk, Donetsk Oblast, where we're seeing that the Ministry of Internal Affairs is resuming its work. The battle situation on the ground has developed in a way that has allowed for these services to return to continue doing what they were initially doing before the invasion, and bringing back some of those resources that they have at their disposal within the government. And what we see is that the Ministry of Internal Affairs is has reopened their offices here, and this will allow them to dedicate more time and resources and support to the areas along the front line, and continue to provide some of these resources to civilians within the area. Take a look. So you can see that there they are, all the officials there outside the city. You can see they're reopening their offices. It's fantastic to see. Evacuation of elderly people are happening here. So this is the Kiev Life-Saving Center. Will evacuate people from some of the most difficult areas of the front lines today. Take a look.
Це ми за вами приїхали. Доброго дня.
Доброго дня, дай Бог.
Доброго дня, да.
Одеваемся, мам, сейчас. Добрый.
Оль, подержи. Давай. Не переживай, все хорошо. Мам, я тут.
Слава Богу, що ви приїхали.
Не
Так.
плач, не надо.
Все нормально буде.
Руку давай право.
Добрий день.
Добрий день.
Щас. На минуточку просто, нічого. Не
Юля, Юля.
Таблеточки попили?
Все,
Выпили, и туалет, все мы сделали. Все, мам, не спеши, тут все нормально. А тут надо буде трошки ножки.
Ага.
Сейчас я трошки. Не открывается. Можно, да, трошки я так? Вот, все.
Дай вторую открывать. Открой, Юля.
Now, there's a little bit of comment coming from Chaos. There was a report today about Russia weaponizing rape and providing Viagra for it. Yes. And Araves, who's one of our researchers, said I did not go through that one and said I might have. Yes. Survivor accounts. Survivor accounts of women who were sexually assaulted by Russian occupational forces in areas of Kharkiv, Sumy, Chernihiv, and Kiev, and other areas that were already under occupation, including areas already within the Kherson Oblast. Survivor accounts state that the individuals here, women in these areas, as well as some men, were sexually assaulted by and raped by Russian forces who were issued by the military, reportedly. They had been issued Viagra as well as condoms. So it would appear, at least according to survivor accounts, that that this was intentional by the Russian Federation as a means and method of warfare, essentially. That's at least what this report is saying. I did not include it. I did not include it because I haven't. I want to, when I report something on that level, I understand that some of these investigative reports being done by other organizations are very credible. But with something that, with that level of implication, I would like to see a report from the United Nations, for instance, or from the from a human rights organization as well, and that like a thing, because to implicate the usage of rape and sexual assault and warfare at a state level is that's huge. That's big. That's a crime against humanity in and of itself. Yeah. So I am. Yeah. UN and sexual assault became. EMS says that the UN did in fact say it. Well, let's see. Russia. Well, United Nations. Can I search the United Nations? Por favor. Is there a search here? God damn it. You think I've been to the United Nations website enough, I would be able to search these things, but let's see. Bring it up on my big screen. Yes, there is. Rape as a weapon. No, I'm not seeing it from that. Oh, it says it's coming from Newsweek is the one I'm seeing the most. UN. Sorry, I'm searching through this. Ah, yes. Very nice. Okay, yeah, it comes from the it does come from UN envoy Pramila Patton. Said that all the indications are there that rape is being used as a weapon by Russian forces in Ukraine. That rape and sexual assault are part of a military strategy perpetrated as a deliberate tactic to dehumanize the victims. Women, when women are held for days and raped, when you start to rape little boys and men, when you see series of genital mutilations, when you hear women testify about Russian soldiers equipped with Viagra, it's clearly a military strategy, said Patton. Special representative on sexual violence and conflict on the level of Under Secretary General. And when victims report what was said during rapes, it's clear a deliberate tactic to dehumanize the victims. This one's the one coming from Newsweek. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Absolutely despicable. Coming from the United Nations Human Rights Council report on it. Investigation on sexual and gender-based violence. Investigation cases related to sexual and gender-based violence present specific challenges. The mission has found that some Russian Federation soldiers committed such crimes. These acts amounted to different types of violations of rights, including sexual violence, torture, and cruel and inhuman treatment. There are examples of cases where relatives were forced to witness the crimes, and in cases where investigated, the age of the sexual gender-based violence ranged from 4 years old to 82 years. Commission has documented cases in which children have been raped, tortured, and unlawfully confined. Children have also been killed and injured in indiscriminate attacks with explosive weapons, and the exposure to repeated explosions, crimes, forced displacement, and separation from family members has deeply affected their well-being and mental health. It's coming from the UN. This is coming from that report released on the 23rd of September by the chair of Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine from the United Nations. So yes. That makes you sick to your stomach. Wide-scale usage of gender-based violence is a crime against humanity, and also depending on the purposes of it, can constitute genocide under the United Nations. Yeah. So that's happening. Great. It was always suspected, but I really was hoping there wouldn't be any confirmation. A good shot. Ukrainian forces using a Stugna-P anti-tank guided missile in the area of Avdiivka, located here near the city of Donetsk, scored a direct hit on a Russian BMP.
Где твоя? У мене. Станцию, говори. Пуск, Шаман.
Есть, сука. Есть, красава. Красавчик.
Перезарядка, перезарядка!
Де ще одна? Дивіться, де ще одна, пацани. Не бачу, де друга. Вона десь в посадку заїхала.
Станция, где твоя?
There's literally no justification in this war whatsoever. There's just no... A valuable man. Ukrainians gathered together $40,000 USD as a reward for anyone who captures Igor Girkin, alive. Intel is that he has deployed as a commander in Ukraine, hence why we have not heard from him for many days now. A Ukrainian S-300 battery was destroyed. An S-300 anti-air battery was destroyed here near Novostepanovsky in Zaporizhia Oblast. Russian forces are beginning to target the Ukrainian air defenses more directly rather than when they present targets of opportunity, destroying Ukrainian capacity to shoot down Russian missiles targeting highly concentrated civilian centers such as Kiev, Odessa, and Lviv. So that is their purpose. They seem to be attempting to directly target Ukrainian air defenses, and so that way that more missiles get through to their targets, which is mostly which have killed dozens of civilians just this week. See here, coming from the drone footage, CS-300 battery there. And you see their launchers are already up, and you can actually see as a launcher here, they try to shoot down this drone. It's a Lancet drone, a loitering munition. So that is 2 Ukrainian S-300 batteries which are destroyed. Over here in Zaporizhia, reports are that more S-300 missiles damaged facilities there in Zaporizhia. For those that don't know, the S-300 system, which is an air defense system, partially has converted stockpiles in the Russian Federation that allowed to hit surface targets. Russia again fired about 10 missiles at Zaporizhia on 10/15, and several energy and industrial facilities were damaged. And this is according to the Zaporizhia Oblast Governor Alexander Storuk. You can see this coming from the Kiev Independent. Nikopol was shelled and wounded at least 7 people. 2 were injured during the night and 5 were injured during the morning attacks, according to Yevhen Yevtushenko, the head of the Nikopol District Military Administration. According to the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast Governor Valentin Reznichenko, more than 50 Russian shells were fired into Nikopol overnight. And coming from the Kiev Independent, we do have, coming from the National Police of Ukraine, some of that destruction from shelling here in Nikopol. And here into the Kherson Oblast, we see the offensive actions are yielding more Russian equipment. Russian forces abandoned their obsolete T-62 tanks and were subsequently captured by Ukrainian forces. Ukrainian troops continue to press the offensive here within the Kherson Oblast. While information regarding the offensive is minimal, rumors are that they have made extensive gains within the region. While this cannot be independently confirmed, there is quite a few rumors at this point regarding it. For those that don't know, that is the Crimean flag. It's a flag of the Crimean Tatars. See more captured Russian T-62s here. And it's not like these are upgraded T-62s either. These are pretty bare bones. We also see a helicopter battle taking place here in the Kherson Oblast. So you can see a Russian helo here in the first couple of frames, and then a Ukrainian helo comes in, fires its rockets, and shoots it down. Take a look. You can see the Russian helicopter there. It's at the very bottom here, but.
О, це хорош відос буде. Давай, блядь, нам! Ебать! Пошел нахуй! А чё він так близько? Ебать! Диви, блядь, ще один, блядь! Ебать, зайшли красавці, нахуй! Чуєш? Ебать! Ебать, в TikTok сейчас видос будет.
As you can see, those guys are very, very happy. But yes, would appear that there are Russian helicopters that are coming in, and they're being engaged by Ukrainian pilots in their helicopters, which is pretty cool. It's a little bit of air-to-air combat there. Out of Sevastopol, we can see that Russian launches of missiles out of Sevastopol, indicating the city is being used as a launching point for many of the missiles that are hitting Ukrainian-held cities and killing dozens of civilians. You can see that photo. But we do have a video of this launch. So the Russians are using the city of Sevastopol as a missile launch site. Not like the outskirts. No. The city of Sevastopol as a launch site. Move over here. In Odessa, they're lighting up the night here. These are spotlights which have been installed in Odessa and Kyiv, rendering Shahed drones useless at night.
Вчора тільки шахіди прилетіли, а сьогодні вже весь Київ буде заставлений ось такими прожекторами. Це ще маленькі, великі в мене ось тут. А самі великі повезли КамАЗи. 1000 прожекторів над Києвом. І срав пес на ваші шахіди, блядь. Що?
And of course, we see more shipments leaving the ports of Odessa there. So 7 vessels carrying 101,000 metric tons of agricultural products left Odessa for countries in Asia and Europe, as reported by the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. So good to see even more ships leaving out. But that is actually everything inside the country of Ukraine. But don't worry, that doesn't mean that's all of the news for the day. We have plenty of other stuff, especially dealing with the war and other locations. As we jump up here, actually, and we move into the international news, we see coming out of Belarus. This is from Orsha, which is on the border between Belarus and Russia. And we see more tanks are heading into Russia from the Belarusian military. We can see these being transported on flatbed rail cars through the city of Orsha. Take a look. And so you can see these are mostly T-72 tanks, best identified by their road wheels and snorkeling gear on the back. They have very small snorkeling gear. But quite a large amount of tanks that are being moved into Russia from Belarus. And as we actually move into Russia, we have a couple of developments, a couple of things coming out of the Belgorod Oblast. First of all, there's an oil depot on fire here in the Belgorod Oblast. It's unknown what the cause of the fire is. Some suspect it may be a Ukrainian strike. At least one of the 7 oil barrels has been destroyed at the storage, and the fire is currently raging. You can see here the destruction. One of these entire oil barrels are just completely destroyed. Seth Fromelt says, it makes me wonder if Comrade Steven Seagal reported for draft yet. He was already providing his services as a propagandist. He's much better as a propagandist than the draftee. Unidentified men opened fire at a military base here near Solodi. Russian Ministry of Defense reports of a terror attack at one of their bases. During an arms training course, three Tajikistani soldiers opened fire at others with machine guns. 2 of the 3 shooters were killed. The third got away. Reportedly, there are at least 11 people killed and 15 injured. According to Baza reports, 22 dead. And thoughts and prayers. Let's see. Thoughts and prayers and the conflict began based off on religion. So they started killing each other based off of religion here. We can see this is coming from RIA. This is coming from RIA. RIA Novosti is a government-run news agency here out of Russia. And down here in the south, this is in the city of Cherkassk, and a recruitment office down here was actually lit on fire. Once again, another recruitment office set ablaze here in Russia, in the city of Cherkassk. Many people in Russia do not support mobilization and have no interest in fighting and dying in Ukraine. Do not get that twisted. They do support the war, but they do not want to die as long as it's not them fighting and dying in the war. So that is the mentality of the Russians. The war is okay as long as I'm not the one fighting and dying, and that is why they are fleeing.
Смотри, горит что-то. Ну-ка, сейчас, подожди. Обалдеть, посмотри. Да ладно, это же военкомат наш. Город Черкесск.
Man watching recruitment offices burn while listening to hard bus. Romania has sent $400,000 in aid to NATO. They contributed $400,000 to NATO's trust funds for enhancing resilience and defense capacities of Ukraine. Romania also will provide $600,000 to neighboring Moldova and $300,000 to Georgia. $100,000 will be sent to deliver consolidating Jordan's air defense as well. Coming from the Kiev Independent. And if you want more information, you can get this from Riri or RRI, and as well as Nexta. Germany is sending 16 Biber Bridge laying tanks to Ukraine. Germany delivered the 16 Biber Bridge layer tanks to Ukraine as pledged in late July. The tanks were expected to enable Ukrainian troops to cross waters or obstacles in combat. Germany also supplied Ukraine with 10 pontoon bridge machines. Once again, coming from the Kiev Independent. And they'll also be sending more Mars 2. They'll be sending Mars 2, which is M270 Mars 2 systems are very similar to the HIMARS system. In fact, they use the same munitions. And they're also sending more PHC 2000s, which is a 155 millimeter self-propelled artillery gun. Down in Istanbul, here in Turkey, a skyscraper was on fire. While there's no information regarding casualties at this point, most of the building has been evacuated. The fire reportedly started inside of the air conditioning system.
Oğlum gel. Oğlum bir. Oğlum.
So we move down here and into the Middle East. We see that out of Tehran, even the prison is on fire there in Tehran. A gun battle in even prison was reported on Saturday night since about 2100 and continued at 2200 local time, which is about 2:30 p.m. DC time, or about 7:30 p.m. London time. Prisoners have broken the doors to get out of their smoke-filled wards, and security forces have fired tear gas. Part of Even's prison's roof was reportedly collapsed. Huge explosions are being reported, but the conditions inside the prison are currently unknown. Phone and internet communications were reported cut. Prison guards have repeatedly shot at prisoners. Security agents have blocked all roads leading to Even prison, including Yadgar Imam Highway. Eyewitnesses saw ambulances and anti-riot police vehicles going to Evin. The Iranian government's news agency said the fire has injured 8 people so far. Evin prison in Tehran has been reported to detain Iran's high-profile detainees and political prisoners.
زندان اوین امروز 23 مهر هستش. از ساعت 8 آتش سوزی رو مشاهده کردیم. صدای تیراندازی داخل زندان قطع نمیشه. آژیر زندان از صبح چندین بار پیاپی به صدا در اومده بود که الان حدوداً از ساعت 8 این آتش سوزی به پا شده. شورش کردن داخل زندان اوین. امروز 23 مهر ماه ساعت 21:52. چرا اومده ولی کاری نکرد. ای وای ای وای ای وای. زندان اوین 23 مهر ماه.
صدای زندانی تو زندان ها اینا خدا کنه آزاد بشن.
نمیشن آزاد نمیشن. اینا دارن میکشنشون. یا علی ترکید بیشرفا. کل یادگار بسته شده. یادگار رو به جنوبم از بالا بستن چون هیچ ماشینی دیگه رد نمیتونه بشه. حالا ما هم میریم ببینیم.
So that's the situation there in Tehran. Move down here and into Africa. We actually see coming out of Tunis here in Tunisia. Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Tunisia's capital to demonstrate against the president, gas shortages, and handling of 18 migrants dead in a shipwreck in Zarzis. Activists denounced the deterioration of the economy. Inflation has reached 9%. The rival political groups denounced Kais Saied as an autocrat who is reversing the diplomatic process made since the 2011 uprising. There's also demanded accountability of the governments of the country's economic crises, which has seen food and fuel shortages. And so that is the situation there in Tunis and in Tunisia. Over in Washington, D.C., today is the Global Hand Washing Day. The Global Hand Washing Day is funded by the Global Hand Washing Partnership and was first celebrated in 2008. In 2022, Global Hand Washing Day theme is Unite for Universal Hand Hygiene. Globally, around 802 million children do not have access to basic hygiene services with water and soap at schools. Only 17.81% of the rural population and 37.16% of the urban population in sub-Saharan Africa have basic hand washing facilities. Coming from the WHO African region. Came from the United Nations and the World Health Organization. You know, you think, how simple hand washing is, but so many places in the world don't have the ability to wash their hands because they don't have clean water. They don't have basic hygiene. They don't have the capacity for it. For instance, every time you're hearing about cholera is spread. The way that cholera spreads is fecal material inside of water. And that's why the cholera epidemics that happened there in London, for instance, this is one of the greatest things that, science for how diseases spreads, is it would center around wells located in mostly poorer areas of London where there really wasn't any sanitation, and so it forced London to have to split the water lines between both sewage and regular water and many other things. When we were talking about cholera in places like at Mariupol, it's because the basic services have been so utterly destroyed. There's literally sewage just laying in this sort of sewage everywhere, and it's getting into the water, drinking water, and people are having to drink out of shell craters, and it's giving them cholera. And cholera makes it very difficult. It makes you mostly diarrhea. You throw up a lot. It dehydrates you, and it eventually kills you, mostly dehydration and lack of nutrients. You see it a lot in Africa. You see it in places out of Port-au-Prince. We had to do some cholera updates there for a little bit. and that's still ongoing. So, but that's all because they don't have access to the basic clean water. We don't have access to this basic clean soap and water. There's no basic sanitation. And it's a lot of the world that doesn't have this stuff. And while you and I take it for granted, considering I'm going to guess and say you may not be affected by this if you're watching this video, you and I may take that for granted, but in many places it kills a lot of people because they don't have this. Out of Vancouver, there's an air quality advisory right now that's been issued to the Eastern Fraser Valley and Central Fraser Valley and Metro Vancouver because of high concentrations of fine particulate matter, primarily due to smoke from wildfires burning southeast of Chilliwack, near Chilliwack Lake, near Hope, and near Harrison Lake, and in Washington. Locals are advised to avoid outdoor activities due to high concentration of PM 2.5. Basically, don't go outside and breathe. Out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, the International Balloon Fiesta, which happened between 10/1 and 10/9. The giant balloons in the shape of a cow, ladybug, and mouse took off in Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta in New Mexico.
Under her direction and leadership, working with, and then supposedly David Adler is flying it.
And then sewed the balloon together. And so all those, the fish, my memory isn't always what it could be.
It is. It's Squeak, that one I was talking about before. Found it. There's the Putty Cat on our screen, and I picture we saw the blue balloon with the yellow Zia on it. So the cow, the little dog is inflated down that end of the field.
So one of my crew, Marianne Layer, had...
As we inflate yet another balloon.
Let's see here.
You remember?
It's kind of fascinating. Hot air balloons are kind of cool. Actually, when I was in school, and this is back in 6th grade, we had a shop class. We actually built a hot air balloon. It was really cool. This is a really cool thing to do. And there's so many cool designs. I didn't even know that many people had a hot air balloon. I mean, I've seen them before in person at like county fairs and stuff, but it's really cool. Kind of fascinating. I'll mark that down as something I need to go do at some point in my life. I've been to Albuquerque. Made a wrong turn in Albuquerque. But I've never been to the Hot Air Balloon Festival, so I'll have to go check that out. Coming out of Manhattan, it's the Flores de Villas Flower Show. A display of floral mannequins and flower installations welcomes visitors to the Flores de Villas Flower Show in downtown Manhattan. And of course there's an ad. Of course there is. Okay, get that ad revenue.
We're so thrilled to be back here for our 3rd show at Hudson Yards, and we're bringing our Femme Show, which is a celebration of remarkable women. So you'll see everyone from the Queen to J-Lo to Bella Abzug to Serena Williams to Billie Holiday, Cheetah Rivera. There's such an incredible variety of women here to be celebrated, and of course the floral talent that goes into it. So each one has been designed and built by a local New York florist. Each installation has hundreds, if not thousands of flowers. Some of the smaller ones have even more. And I want to say over 100 hours on each mannequin.
That's pretty cool. That's a lot of talent. That is a ton of talent, by the way. My aunt is actually a florist and owns a floral shop. So I know... I've seen how much work goes into just normal floral decorations. This is quite an immense amount of talent. This is very impressive. It is 100% an art. But very, very cool. Very cool indeed. And very beautiful. But with that, that's actually all the news that we have in the world over the last 24 hours there. And there's quite a few just not very good things. There's quite a few dark topics, and obviously some individuals that may not agree with what we present here. While we do maintain a bias, I'm always going to present the facts with it as to why I have a bias for something, if we do have one. But rather, a lot of places don't outwardly state their bias, and I just want to make it very well known what the position is for that instance. And so with that, I hope that you guys and your family and your friends remain safe. And if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Thank you for joining us today here on the New News for the latest updates. Please, if you can, support the wonderful organizations in the description trying to help people. We hope to have even more added onto that list here in the very near future, as we got a ton in. And please keep them coming. But with that, my name is Paul from the New News. Hopefully you will join us once again on Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time at 9 p.m. Central for another 48 hours of news in review. In the meantime, have a wonderful and safe Sunday. Have a great Monday and a great start to your week. And my name is Paul from the New News, and have a great night, everybody.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям плечом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your number 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляно волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТРО. Ідіть нахуй!